The NFT market is down pretty bad, much like crypto and stocks, but I believe the worst is still yet to come. Yes, I think the NFT market could possibly crash in the next few months, and there's a few reasons why. But Matt, what about the explosive growth that the NFT space has seen since last summer? I mean, just look at how steep that growth curve is, and that's just on OpenSea. Well, that's true. The growth has been explosive since last summer, and it's certainly not crashed yet. But this rapid growth is actually slowing down quite a bit. And well, as individual investors in the NFT market get more and more experienced in the space, they start to mature. They make smarter decisions, they get more aggressive with taking profits, and they are much less likely to FOMO into bad projects for fear of missing the train. So when you have just a few total million investors in the space, it makes it a bit quicker for the entire market to mature after just a few months. Okay, great. So with slower growth, there's less newbies coming to the space, and the people that are already here are starting to get smarter at trading. But what does this really equate to? Well, what we saw in January was the absolute pico top of the NFT market in the history of the NFT space so far. It was completely unlike what we see right now, which is marked by slower growth and a much more mature market. So let's look back to January real quick to see what caused this perfect storm of explosive volume, and then we can see what factors from that time lead me to believe that we're in for a rough patch right now and for the next couple months. One of the most critical factors in the perfect January storm is that the explosive inflow of new traders allowed a small amount of mature investors that were already in the space in January to dump their whitelist mints and their NFT bags onto some of those new buyers. A lot of these new buyers in January were amped up on the fact that they might miss out on this train that was leaving the station, or the FOMO that was present at the time. And in other words, the exit liquidity for potentially overinflated NFT prices was heavily abundant in January. This is exactly why you saw things like Hatebeast have an 8 Ethereum floor right after their mint, to what is now a 0.65 ETH floor. That literally means that if you held this NFT from then in January till now in May, that you bought an NFT that is now worth literally 10 times less than what it was in the first week of minting. And that's just one example of hype, FOMO, and the naive traders pumping floor prices well beyond their reasonable value. Now, like I mentioned, in January, the NFT space was in a perfect storm, and I want to map out what the ingredients of that storm were that made it so fruitful at the time. Ingredient number one is what we kind of just highlighted. User adoption and growth was at an all-time high. Ingredient number two, search traffic was also at an all-time high. If you look at Google Trends, you can see this very clearly that from January 16th to January 31st, the searches worldwide for NFTs were the highest they have ever been. This is a very accurate detailing that not only was the space hot at the time, but the word was traveling about NFTs and people were looking into them more than ever before. That high level of interest and search volume likely brought in a lot of retail traders just like you and me. Now, by comparison, the search traffic for NFTs now is about a 30 out of 100, which is roughly the same level of interest we saw in October and in August, which is actually right around the time that I entered the space. Now, I can tell you this from experience. The scene is significantly more mature and very different now than it was back in August and October. Yet the level of interest, at least on Google Trends, is the same. And if you look at my YouTube analytics or other people's YouTube analytics, that criteria also matches. So with similar demand for new investors, but worse market sentiment, and a group of significantly more savvy traders already in this space, it makes for a way harder path for a big ROI on overinflated floor prices. This cycle leads to flippers and traders dumping on each other instead of dumping on the newbies, and that quickly drives prices to real market values where there's often way less crazy yields. Now, because a lot of projects are still using the whitelist meta as their launch method, you can see how the lack of demand through the vehicles of FOMO and hype quickly kill the momentum of a project where the instant return of the investment isn't present. In other words, if you have a whitelist and you can't immediately flip it for profit, the hype momentum of that project dies very quickly because the floor prices of that project are much more realistic. Wait, So you mean I actually have to buy an NFT that I want to hold because I think there's a long-term value in it and I'm not going to be able to flip it for a 5x instantly? Nah, I don't think I'm going to do that. That doesn't sound very fun to me. You see the point? Ingredient number 3, the perceived value of projects was also at an all-time high in January. In other words, there were a handful of seemingly great new NFT projects coming out at that time that promised new utility, great 3D artwork, or teams that were more robust and excitable than many previous collections up to that point. The speculation of these things drove prices even higher as word spread that 2 to 10x returns were somewhat of a norm in NFTs at that point. So take that high perceived value and pair that with hopium and decent quality looking projects, and you quickly get some speculation of market values that are just truly insane, like Hate Beast. Ingredient number 4. Market volume in January was also at an all-time high, and this can be a byproduct of these 3 other points, but just look at this chart and you can very easily see that even though things really started to pick up in July of 2021, it was January of 2022 that saw by far the most explosive and consistent daily volume. I mean, look at this. The demand was through the roof. If we look at my NFT calendar for that month, every single whitelist that we got for the alpha group was pretty much at least a 3x instant return on investment, with some of these projects yielding a 20 to 40x within a week. That is truly unprecedented demand and a ton of volume that's required for that to happen. Ingredient number 5. There were seemingly large innovation catalysts on the horizon. The 2 biggest ones that got a ton of attention were Twitter implementing NFTs as profile pictures through a verified format, which we now know is the hexagon PFP shape, and obviously the big kahuna at the time, the catalyst that many people were talking about, was Coinbase NFT was planning to launch in late 2021 or early 2022, and that would surely save the NFT space from broken sea, and everything would see a huge influx of volume, right? Wrong. But hey, at least at the time, this news was positive and it was driving a lot of positive sentiment, and this was even further pushing speculative prices much higher. Think about it. If your project gets listed on Coinbase NFT, you almost certainly saw that project's floor price pump at the time, and people expected that when Coinbase NFT actually launched, all those projects that were on it would instantly see more volume from retail and institutional investors, and that would help the overall market get pumped even more. Buy the rumor, sell the news is obviously a saying, because guess what? If you bought the news, you'd be down right now because Coinbase NFT so far has flopped. And ingredient number 6, seeing that it was January, this marked a new fiscal year for all the financial markets. So investors, especially the bigger ones, had a fresh year to toy with their investment allocations and start the new year off with some purchases that may not be as tax conscious as they would be if they made these investments later in the year or even closer to tax day in April. There are other reasons that could also contribute to why January did so well, but these 6 points are the main ones. So with all that in mind, let's compare where January was, the absolute pinnacle for NFTs so far, to where we are now and see what's different. First off, the user growth is slowing. Secondly, the search traffic is down to the lowest levels we've seen since August of 2021. Third, the perceived value is arguably as low as it's also been since August 2021, when things started to pick up and the PFP craze began. Many people currently believe that we are already in a crypto and NFT bear market, or are soon going to enter one. Fourth, market volume is quite low right now compared to almost every other month in the last year. That is definitely not a good sign. Number 5, there are no major news catalysts that are driving market sentiment anymore. Coinbase NFT, as we said, was a massive flop on launch thus far. It really didn't do anything to bolster new purchases or bring investors in or pump floor prices at all. In fact, Very few people have actually used Coinbase NFT, and they are sticking with Broken Sea for the time being. And then you also had major platforms like Instagram and Twitter integrate NFTs. And to be honest with you, it's kind of already old news, and it really hasn't done a whole lot in terms of making the market go crazy. The last point here is that May is typically known as sell in May and go away, where most markets from May to October perform weekly as opposed to November to April when markets tend to perform a bit better. And this makes sense, right? People in May typically go on summer vacations. They sell a lot of stuff to pay for those vacations. They forget about their stock portfolio or their crypto portfolio, or maybe in this case, their NFT portfolio. And so they're not as active. There's less volume, there's less demand. And generally speaking, if there's less volume and demand, prices tend to drop. So clearly right now, compared to January, we are worse off in every one of the 6 points we've talked about. Things are looking quite dreadful, to say the least. And it doesn't get any better when you look at the broad market or individual blue chip NFT floor prices over the last 30 to even 90 days. Look, I mean, many blue chip projects are down from their all-time highs by 20 to 50%. And FUD from things like Azuki, which is one of the biggest blue chip NFTs, from their founder, Zagabond, being part of previous rug projects, is never a great sign for the NFT space in general. I mean, realistically, how could you trust that any other blue chip might not face the same scrutiny at scrutiny? How do you say scrutiny? How could you trust that any other blue chip might not face the same scrutiny as Azuki did? And we saw what happened there. The floor tanked 20 ETH in a matter of days. With that in mind, you really can't. You can't be so sure that these blue chips, just because they're blue chips, aren't also susceptible to some kind of FUD that could really hurt prices. Okay, I get it. Lots of doom and gloom, but listen. My fundamental opinion of the NFT space hasn't changed even an ounce. I believe this space is going to explode much further, but I do think that before we top the January level of growth and volume, we're first going to probably see a rough patch in the market. Traders who are here will stay here and continue to try and flip for profit or find ways to make money. Except now they'll be flipping on each other instead of flipping on a lot of new people coming to the space, which will eventually lead to some winners and some losers, but ultimately it may drive many project floors a bit lower. About 98% of projects will probably not even survive this first bear winter that is ironically coming during the summer months, but the projects that do manage to survive and hold some semblance of a stable value during this time will be the ones that should be considered blue chips when things get fruitful again. I expect to see lots of projects, including top ones, fall up to an additional 20 to 40% from here right now. Things like Doodles, World of Women, Azuki, Clone X, Cool Cats, Kaiju Kings, Moonbirds, Mutant Apes, and other deeds could get sliced by another third of the prices they're at right now. This would put many of them down over 60% from their all-time highs. And for ones that have strong teams, great communities, and real utility, I think picking some up at those heavily discounted prices could be insanely profitable investments if you have strong enough hands to hold through what could be a very long downtime. That's exactly what my strategy is going to be. It's just hard to know when exactly to buy and how long you'll really need to hold to find those true winners. And that's why I'll be right here with whichever of you guys want to decide to ride through this cold bear market with me. One of the best ways to metaphorically huddle for warmth during this time and stay on top of all of the craziness is to join my private alpha group with the link in the card right up here or down below. We'll see you guys in there.